Today I'm in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, apparently home to the Bronze Fonz, Harley-Davidson, the Brewers, and Milorganite. Now, I don't own a motorcycle and I rarely have time to attend a sporting event, but I do spend a lot of time in my garden, and from time to time I use Milorganite like I have for years. But I know a lot of you have questions like I did about what is Milorganite? Like, what's it made of? Is it organic? And more importantly, is it safe to use in your lawn and landscape, and especially your food garden? So I thought it would be a good idea to come right to the source of where Milorganite was invented and where it still happens today. Plus, it's also the place you have to come to see how it's made. And while we're here, we'll get some answers to those tough and most common questions that we have. Now, the best person to do that with is Jeff Spence. Jeff is the Sales and Marketing Director for Milorganite. Hi, Jeff.
Good morning, Joe, and welcome to the Jones Island Water Reclamation Facility.
Thank you. Now, let me ask you this first before we start our tour on how Milorganite is made. Tell me a little bit about the company's position on stewardship and sustainability.
Well, we believe that our mission is to protect the environment and public health. And so we do a number of different things to engage community and to help drive some of the core areas of our business. From a participation perspective, we actually engage the community by using a number of tools. Rain barrels, rain gardens, cisterns. We do a lot with green roofs to really manage water where it falls. So by 2035, our goal is to become less dependent on traditional sources and to produce a lot of our own energy to run these facilities.
While still making a lot of Milorganite.
Absolutely.
So we're going to see how it's made, but let's talk about that for a second. Let's address the elephant in the room right off the bat, because a lot of people have basically a misconception that the product is really just maybe human waste in a bag to sewage sludge. But let's talk about what it is and, more importantly, what it's not.
Well, you know, it's interesting. Over the close to 90 years of producing Milorganite, there's always been this misperception of what Milorganite is. And we work to really educate people on this whole process of not only cleaning wastewater, but the making of Milorganite. What Milorganite really is are the microbes, or the bugs as we call them, that are the engine to clean wastewater. The wastewater treatment process is really a biological process, and it's those microbes or bugs that are used to consume all of the organics material that are in wastewater. And then wastewater is further treated to a point where it can be released into Lake Michigan.
Right. And so we're going to really look at the focus of the water process and how it becomes a solid and ultimately the dry granular fertilizer product.
Absolutely.
All right, well, let's start it then.
Thank you. The wastewater treatment process is a multi-step process in Milwaukee where we screen off large debris, anywhere a quarter of an inch or larger. And then the water is placed in a settling tank where any other debris settles. Fats, oils, and grease are skimmed off. Then the water is placed into the secondary treatment phase. That's where our microbes do their work. They digest any organic materials that are still left in that water. The water is then decanted over for disinfection, chlorination, dechlorination, and then released into Lake Michigan.
So if we're just talking about the liquid, walk me through the process of how it goes from wastewater to a solid fertilizer product.
So what you have here are our microbes or bugs at work. Those billions of microbes are digesting any organic materials that are in this water. Once that's done, they're harvested. So the water is squeezed out, moved out. It goes into our dewatering and drying facility where Milorganite is made, and a thickener is added to bind the bugs. And then more water is squeezed out. So you get to a consistency of cardboard in terms of those bugs.
Okay. So this leads me to a question, and just to recap what I think I heard you say, we've got billions and billions of organisms here, or bugs, consuming the organic matter and the nutrients in the wastewater, and then you're introducing that thickening agent. So the thickening agent then is brought in, and yet Milorganite is classified as an organic nitrogen fertilizer. So how do you get away with that?
It's the nitrogen that is considered organic.
Yeah.
The process by which the fertilizer is made it disqualifies it as being an organic product. We're adding elements to it that would not be something that you would see happen in any other organic product. And so the EPA puts Milorganite in its own, or biosolids, in its own category. Not necessarily an organic product, but has organic constituents.
Jeff, from what I know through cooking, you have to heat food, meat for example, to a certain internal temperature to ensure that you've killed the pathogens that could make you sick. It's the high heat that kills the pathogens. Is that the premise here as well?
That is the premise here, Joe. I mean, what we're dealing with is 12 dryers the size of buses. No different than a dryer that you have at home, but the temperature gets a lot warmer. So we heat our dryers at a temperature of 1200 degrees. The product in those dryers can get as high as about 185 degrees. So you're killing off pathogens that could be harmful to public.
So Jeff, now we've moved into one of the many labs where I know a lot of the testing is done. And one of the things that I know people have a little bit of a concern about, at least some people, is that there may be heavy metals in the Milorganite fertilizer. And you can't heat that away with all the microbe activity, right?
That's correct, Joe.
So what's to prevent somebody upstream from introducing something into the wastewater that has heavy metals in it? What are the safeguards that you put in place so I can feel confident that it's not going to be in my fertilizer?
Great question. So we have two different systems that we use to prevent that from occurring. The first is monitoring industries in the area to ensure that metals that don't get treated in the biological system don't end up in the system. So we have pre-treatment system where the monitoring occurs. We actually go out on a regular basis and check out those facilities. What we also do from a fertilizer standpoint is we analyze everyday production to make sure that those bad actors aren't in there at levels that would be considered harmless.
And then there's the issue with pharmaceuticals. That's as big a deal as anything else for a lot of people, and it can come from anywhere. So how do you safeguard those from showing up in your product?
The reality of this is that pharmaceuticals and household chemicals will show up in wastewater streams. The systems aren't geared to handling pharmaceuticals. The reality is that the pathway for contamination isn't biosolids. It's typically water. When you see things happening in the environment relative to changes to invertebrates, it's through water, not through biosolids. And a lot of work has been done relative to risk assessments to high exposure groups using biosolids. Homeowner using our product would not be exposed to any high risk situations.
So really at this point, your role is to monitor it as best you can because it's so ubiquitous. I mean, even people that buy other organic fertilizers, bone meal, feather meal, I mean, the animals ultimately might have been fed something with a pharmaceutical in it that ended up as fertilizer.
Absolutely. Unless you cut back on those medicines or find better ways of breaking those down once they get out of our systems.
And breaking it down, talk about the pathway from the point that it maybe enters the waste stream to the point that it ends up in our plants or in our stomachs.
Yeah, so when you use a fertilizer product, in particular fertilizer like Milorganite, it is coming through the production systems, but that fertilizer is being put on the ground with a lot of other elements. What we see through research is that the uptake of those nutrients in the fertilizer and those micro impurities of the pharmaceuticals and the like, they're not showing up in the plant.
But if it's in the water to begin with, and you can't separate it out, it doesn't matter what you're making, it could end up in the finished product.
Absolutely. If it's in the water, if it's in the soil profile, then you run the same level of risk.
So, but back to the long tail, or how long it takes for it to get to the finished product, I mean, we can pretty much draw the conclusion that we're dealing with vegetables that are safe to eat. with the fertilizer
Oh,
product?
absolutely. One study suggests that you would need to consume over 1,200 pounds of corn a day to have an adverse effect from any minute pharmaceutical products or personal care products that might find its way into that crop.
Wow. And it's only because we now have the ability to detect down to that minute level to even know that.
Absolutely. And as the science continues to advance, we'll find out more about what we're putting out into the environment and the best ways to control those issues.
So there you have it. I hope that you found this video helpful in learning more about how Milorganite is made, as well as the safety of using the product. But there's a lot more information on their website at milorganite.com. And if you don't find what you're looking for right away, then you should contact them directly right there as well.